The stars had always been silent. To the galactic empires that ruled from glowing citadels and biometallic fortresses, Earth was just a minor dot in a forgotten spiral arm. Humans, primitive, emotional, short-lived, good for labor, maybe cannon fodder. At best, they were tolerated. At worst, they were ignored. That all changed the day the ships rose. They came without warning. No grand transmission, no diplomatic protocol, no light show of artificial gravity. Just silence. Cold, thunderous silence. The fleet appeared like ghosts. Massive, angular warships made of scorched steel and plated with black armor that shimmered like oil. They broke through the dark zones near Neptune, systems long abandoned and deemed uninhabitable. Admiral Kairos of the Virex Dominion was the first to detect them. His fleet had been surveying the Sol system for resource prospects, a routine patrol. He never expected resistance, much less this. His transmission log was short and panicked, crackled through static and fear. "They've awakened. They're not primitive. Gods help us. They've been preparing." No one responded, because 10 seconds later, his entire battlecruiser disappeared from every sensor grid. On Earth, things weren't much better. Civilians screamed as old cities that had been long sealed off, Detroit Arc, Siberian Bastion, the Sahara bunkers, lit up. What the world thought were abandoned ruins were anything but. Metal towers groaned and rose from underground. Ancient cranes swung into motion, and launch pads once buried beneath a century of dust roared with life. No leader came forward, no president, no prime minister, only one voice, calm, male, and aged by war, spoke to the galaxy. It came from every screen, across every ship frequency, and in every known alien tongue. "We were never sleeping. We were waiting. You took our skies. You took our children. But you forgot the men we used to be. And now, we remember." For decades, humanity had played the weakling. Trade deals, resource exchanges, joining the Galactic Accord as a third-tier member species, letting aliens pluck Earth's orbitals, dictate terms, tax their technology. It was humiliation wrapped in diplomacy, and most humans had accepted it. But not all. The Ghost Protocol, buried in black-budget programs older than most nations, had never shut down. A secret coalition of war veterans, rogue scientists, and loyalists had kept the real Earth hidden, training in silence, building in shadows, using old tech designs that the newer AI-run empires laughed at as obsolete. Only they weren't obsolete. Because human weapons weren't run by AI, they were run by men, angry, flawed, desperate men. And alien AIs had never been programmed for that kind of unpredictability. Colonel Maddox stood on the bridge of Vengeance-class warship Exile, a ship so massive it eclipsed moons, a behemoth made of forgotten alloys and scarred by prototype tests. His eyes, cold and bloodshot, scanned the tactical display as his fleet emerged like wolves among sheep. His voice was hoarse. "Launch the first volley. Target their pride ships. Leave the diplomats for last." The aliens thought they understood humanity. Compassionate, merciful, negotiable. But they hadn't met these humans. And the forgotten warships, silent for over a century, finally howled once more. The first volley tore through space like a god's whisper, silent, unrelenting, final. Humanity's forgotten warships didn't use energy beams or elegant plasma spirals. They used raw mass, hyper-accelerated slugs traveling at fractions of light speed. Nothing beautiful, just brutal kinetic truth. 3 Virex capital ships blinked out of existence, each reduced to a tumbling storm of debris in under 6 seconds. Their shielding tech, calibrated for energy dispersion, folded under sheer velocity. It wasn't war. It was slaughter. Maddox didn't flinch. On board the Exile, silence ruled the bridge. No cheers, no smiles, only men hardened by exile and time, watching as their ghosts returned to haunt the galaxy. They weren't fighting for glory. This was payback, pure, undiluted. Contact from the Accord Council. The Coam's officer grunted. They're demanding a ceasefire, threatening sanctions. Maddox leaned forward, elbows on the scorched console. Tell them we've been under sanctions for 100 years. One more won't change anything. He didn't hate them all, at least not at first. When humanity joined the Galactic Accord, it was supposed to be a step forward. Unity. Peace. But what Earth got was occupation disguised as diplomacy. Alien corporations stripped the oceans for minerals. Orbital stations taxed Earthbound trade routes to the brink of collapse. Human colonies off-world were supervised by alien peacekeepers who brought anything but peace. And when a group of Terran miners on the moons of Alpha 9 protested, they vanished. No records, no justice, just erased. That's when Maddox walked away from his decorated military career. Disappeared. People thought he drank himself to death in a Martian slum. The truth was far worse. He joined the underground, the dying ember of resistance that would one day become Earth's wrath. Now that day had come. Across the solar system, old military silos cracked open like tombs. The Sahara bunkers deployed rail platforms that launched autonomous defense drones the size of skyscrapers. The Antarctic vaults unsealed biological warfare capsules, monsters engineered to resist everything but their human handlers. Entire cities like Neo-Tokyo and Berlin Nexus vanished under their own domes, converted into mobile fortress zones. On the moon, a Virex scout ship hovered above what it thought was a civilian observatory. What it didn't realize was that the observatory was a disguised hangar bay. When the human defense cannon emerged, it only had time to register the impossible before a magnetic spear pierced its hull, splitting the ship in half mid-air. The Galactic News Network scrambled to spin it. Earth's unexpected militarization. Human aggression threatens Accord stability. Terrorists seize ancient tech. But even the most loyal alien reporters couldn't deny the footage now streaming across systems. Massive warships crawling out of Earth's crust, tanks rolling through Martian deserts, and humans, real humans, standing tall in black armor, faces scarred, guns older than some star systems, firing with brutal precision. There was no charismatic leader to rally behind, no savior in a cape. Just men like Maddox, tired of bending, tired of begging, tired of pretending they were weak. In the orbit of Jupiter, another fleet from the Accord tried to stand their ground. 15 ships, equipped with Class 8 energy fields and the latest predictive AI systems. They surrounded the Exile and its fleet in a classic containment ring. "Transmit surrender terms," their commander barked. "Inform them they are surrounded." Maddox didn't even glance at the message. "Target the AI cores, fire through the gaps, leave no survivors." In one devastating minute, the sky above Jupiter turned into a graveyard. As the last Accord ship exploded into flame, Maddox's voice echoed through all open channels. "You thought you had tamed us. You didn't realize we were just waiting for the right kind of anger." By the time the smoke cleared over Jupiter's rings, what was left of the Accord fleet was nothing more than drifting shrapnel and silence. Human warships moved like predators. No hesitation, no drama, just precision. These were not weapons designed to intimidate. They were made to end things. In the shadow of that massacre, the rest of the galaxy began to tremble. Across alien empires, council chambers erupted in chaos. The Selvarin Consortium ordered emergency scans of their bordering sectors. The Uralex hegemony dispatched Black Ops scouts to Earth's orbit, hoping to map this new threat. Even the ever-proud Morithan dynasty, which hadn't fought a true war in centuries, suddenly began reinstating conscription. No one had expected this. Humanity, the doormat of the Accord. Humanity, the species everyone insulted to their face in the halls of diplomacy. Now they had revealed an arsenal older than most galactic civilizations, machines with names like Sovereign Wrath, Silent Choir, and Oblivion Bastard. The names alone struck terror. Not poetic, not majestic, just honest and ugly, like the species that made them. And Earth wasn't done. From the dark side of Mars, the Ashen Veil, a cruiser built in the style of forgotten Terran submarines, emerged in total silence. Its stealth fields were so refined, it appeared only on visual confirmation. It didn't fire. It didn't speak. It simply passed through a Morathan outpost field, scanned everything, and left. Every single alien vessel in its path turned their weapons inward after it left, convinced they had already been compromised. Back on Earth, in the ruins of what had once been Paris District Alpha, Maddox stood in the cold, grey light of dawn. The city, long abandoned, had become the central command hub for the returning fleets. Missiles bristled from towers that were once art museums. The Sen had been rerouted to power underground reactors. Beside Maddox stood another figure, older, limping, his skin wrapped in burns from decades past. General Norrin, one of the first leaders of the Ghost Protocol, a man the galaxy had declared dead 40 years ago. "You didn't hesitate," Norrin said quietly. "No point," Maddox replied. "They never gave us mercy. Why should we offer them anything now?" Norrin nodded, though there was something almost mournful in his stare. "The men under your command, they're not the same kids we trained. They're colder, meaner." "They had to be," Maddox said flatly. "We didn't raise diplomats, we raised survivors. But even survivors needed fuel, and humanity's fleets, vast as they were, couldn't last forever on old reserves. Their technology, while devastating, was built on principles considered outdated by galactic standards. If this war dragged on, Earth would eventually be choked out by the sheer economic and logistical weight of the empires. Maddox knew it. That's why he wasn't playing for a long war. He was playing for fear. "Give me an update on Operation Black Echo," he ordered. The officer beside him stiffened. "Sir, that plan involves targeting Accord diplomatic corps." "I'm aware," Maddox said. "Are the infiltration units in position?" "Yes, sir. Embedded in 12 systems, awaiting the launch code." "Good. We'll make them bleed where it hurts." This wasn't about conquest. Maddox didn't care about alien planets, their cultures, or their trillions of citizens. He cared about memory, about making sure the galaxy never forgot that humans, when cornered, didn't plead. They burned. As the sun rose over Paris Command, a message echoed from Earth's war network, broadcast in a low, grim voice. "We aren't asking for peace. We aren't asking for terms. We are showing you what happens when you mistake patience for weakness." The first diplomatic corps fell in less than 8 minutes, deep within the heart of the Accord's central node, Station Alvaron, orbiting the binary stars of Ithar Prime. 12 human operatives walked in wearing maintenance uniforms. No weapons, no armor, just confidence and the kind of hatred that couldn't be trained, only earned. They didn't start with bombs. They started with the lights. First the corridors dimmed, then the oxygen filtration slowed. Panic spread. Security bots activated, but their systems had already been rewritten. By the time the Accord guards realized it wasn't a glitch, half the station was in total lockdown. That's when the humans pulled the trigger. Explosives disguised as coolant cores detonated in perfect sync. Whole wings of the station crumpled like paper. Politicians screamed in suffocating silence, their escape pods jammed, overridden by old Earth code. Code the galaxy considered obsolete, unbreakable, and forgotten. They weren't forgotten. Maddox watched it happen in real time from the command deck of the Exile. The screen flickered as Station Alvaron's broadcast feed went dark. One more hub of galactic arrogance reduced to debris and flame. No one cheered. They weren't here for applause. They've begun rerouting their communications through Tier 2 Council satellites, Norrin said beside him. They're panicking. They should, Maddox replied. Fear is a language they finally understand. He turned and faced the war room's holographic projection, a cluster of blinking red systems across the galactic map. Each represented a key Accord stronghold, each with human infiltrators already buried inside, waiting. Not soldiers, survivors. People who'd watched their homes sold off, watched their families thrown into labor colonies under interstellar cooperation mandates. They were quiet for years. Now they were vengeance. Time to escalate, Maddox said coldly. Begin Black Echo Phase 2. I want the Athari Nexus offline by nightfall. Norrin hesitated. The Nexus is their civilian relay hub, shutting it down. Billions will go dark. Maddox didn't blink. They never asked how many humans went dark when they shut down Earth's lunar grids. They never cared, so neither do I. Outside, the warships kept moving. The Ashen Veil had already jumped to its next target, a hidden shipyard above Zelva 3. The Oblivion bastard took up orbit over Venus, preparing for a deep launch strike against the Accord's central military conclave on Goresh Prime. But not everyone on Earth was celebrating. In an underground shelter beneath Old Moscow, a woman named Mara sat staring at the static on her comms panel. Her husband had been one of the infiltrators. She hadn't heard from him since Alvaron fell. Her son, just 12, looked up at her with hollow eyes. Did Dad win? Mara swallowed, her voice dry. He did what he had to. Is he coming home? She didn't answer, because this war wasn't about coming home. It was about making sure no one else had to live like they had. Watched, caged, bought, and sold like second-class parasites. Earth had never been weak. It had just been tired. Beaten down by treaties, manipulated through debt, lied to by smiling aliens who talked about progress while draining humanity's soul. But the mask was off now. Across the galaxy, whispers spread like fire through dry brush. Humans have returned. The Earthborn are not what we thought. They never surrendered. They waited. And in the halls of the Accord, old empires remembered what it meant to be afraid. On the edge of the galactic rim, in the cold black between stars, the Accord finally struck back. A coalition fleet, 50 ships strong, drawn from 7 alien empires, emerged from subspace in synchronized formation. At the center of the formation was the Aurelius Crown, a massive war dreadnought capable of planetary bombardment. Its commander, Varlan Sirek of the Hroth Dominion, was a legend, brutal, tactically flawless, and fanatically loyal to the Accord. The target was simple: Mars. Destroy the Terran forward base. Crush the morale. Show the galaxy that humans, no matter how feral or clever, were still a lesser species. They arrived at 0300 Galactic Standard Time. By 0302, 3 ships had vanished. No warning, no weapons fire, just gone. Sirek snarled, ordering full scan sweeps. Then came the jamming. Not from known tech. This was something older, crude, analog, dirty. It didn't suppress signals, it overloaded them. Radio interference flooded the channels. Static that didn't just break comms, it screamed through them. Real human voices, screaming. We remember! We remember! We remember! The rest of the fleet hesitated. Then the attack came. From beneath the Martian crust, twin towers burst through the soil, launching twin volleys of hypersonic torpedoes. The Virex Gallant exploded mid-maneuver, its antimatter cores rupturing in a blinding bloom. Human interceptors, small and vicious, tore through the battle formation using manual guidance. flying suicide routes no AI would ever attempt. They didn't dodge, they charged. On the Exile, Maddox watched from a command relay hub. "They'll keep sending fleets," Norrin muttered beside him. "Every time we kill one, another will come." Maddox's jaw clenched. "Then we'll keep killing." "But we can't win this long term. Even you know that. They have billions more, thousands of worlds, resources we can't match. That's why we're not here to win. We're here to scar them." He turned toward the strategic map. Red flashing indicators lit across Earth, Mars, and dozens of human-held nodes. Not defensive, not passive, offensive. "Prepare Operation Chimera," Maddox said. "We're not holding the line. We're tearing theirs apart." Chimera was madness. It involved splitting the remaining fleet into dozens of fragmented strike teams, each one deep infiltrating alien systems, not with the intent to capture, but to burn. War by infection. Civil unrest by precision fear. Norrin shook his head. "You're going to make them believe humans are monsters." Maddox didn't look away from the screen. "Good." Elsewhere, on the surface of Phobos, Captain Rain, one of Maddox's most ruthless tacticians, stood atop a ridgeline watching the wreckage of the alien fleet spiral toward Mars. His squad had taken out 4 ships using improvised launchers powered by scavenged nuclear fuel. They had no fancy targeting systems, just guts, timing, and desperation. One of his men approached, blood streaked across his armor. "Sir, the last survivors are requesting mercy." Ryan lit a cigarette with a shaking hand. "Mercy?" he said, voice dry. "Did they give any to the colony kids on Titan? To the engineers on Kepler 12b? The soldier said nothing. "Execute them. Leave the bodies. Let the vultures ask what happened." Rain didn't enjoy it, but he did it anyway, because humans had asked for mercy for decades, and the galaxy had answered with exploitation, with silence, with extinction by paperwork. Now the silence was broken. Now humanity was shouting, and the galaxy was finally starting to listen. The thing about monsters was, once you became one, there was no turning back. News of the Mars massacre, as the galactic media called it, spread like infection. Images leaked, alien corpses, ships ripped open, and the raw brutality of human warfare. The Accord tried to control the narrative. They broadcast shaky footage of human soldiers dragging bodies, urban ruins with the Accord flag burning, civilians sobbing under crumbling buildings. But it didn't have the effect they hoped. Instead of uniting the galaxy against Earth, it ignited fear in the deepest sense. Not rage, not duty. Fear. These weren't the humans the galaxy had come to know. These weren't the polite traders, the quiet diplomats, the harmless scientists who asked for help during every summit. These were men with fire in their blood, and nothing left to lose. And the one thing the galaxy couldn't fight was a human with no hope, because he fought like death already had him. On the Exile, Maddox reviewed the Chimera strikes. 11 target systems hit, 5 spaceports obliterated, 2 communication nodes sabotaged. 1 planetary governor executed live on broadcast, her Accord title jammed into her throat by a human agent. Every time the Accord tried to organize, humans were already there, slipping through cracks they hadn't even known existed. The question wasn't how, it was how long had they been preparing this? Norrin slammed his fist onto the table. "We've made our point. We've done enough. They're falling apart. Their people are turning on them. If we keep going, we'll lose whatever soul we had left." Maddox's eyes were cold. Did they worry about our soul when they let Earth rot in trade embargoes? When they turned Titan into a graveyard? This is different. Number, it's finally the same. Norrin looked away, tired. What happens after this? After the killing? Maddox didn't answer. Because he didn't know. Or maybe he didn't care. He'd spent too long fighting a war no one believed in. A war everyone thought was already lost. Now that the tide had turned, now that humans were feared again, he wasn't about to let it go. That same night, the Accord Council called an emergency meeting. 11 representatives stood in a vast chamber above the skies of Kefaris, arguing in hushed panic. The human threat wasn't just a military one, it was psychological. Species that had never feared war were suddenly stockpiling arms. Border worlds were going dark, locking down their own citizens. Some empires even suspected each other of harboring human sympathizers. It wasn't a war anymore. It was chaos. In the shadows of the Kefaris chamber, a small device blinked red. No one noticed. 20 seconds later, the core support beams of the entire structure detonated from the inside. The station cracked like an egg, spilling fire and council members into the void. That device, human-made, but the genius behind it wasn't a soldier, it was a janitor whose brother was executed by alien debt collectors. He spent 2 decades earning clearance to get that close. 2 decades sweeping the halls of the enemy, smiling, waiting. Now he was dead. But so were the leaders who signed away Earth's sovereignty. Back on Earth, news of the Council's death spread like wildfire, and for the first time in over a century, Earth's skies were free of alien oversight. No drones, no tariffs, no peacekeepers. Just silence. And silence to a man like Maddox was the sound of a job not yet finished. The fires hadn't stopped. From the ruins of Kefaris Station to the now blackened skies above Erathon Prime, the galaxy was burning from the inside out. Not because Earth had superior numbers, they didn't. Not because they held better tech. Most of what humanity used was considered obsolete junk. No, the galaxy burned because, for the first time in recorded history, the prey had become the predator. Across thousands of systems, a single phrase echoed in hushed tones on back channels and pirate broadcasts. The Earthborn remember. What they remembered wasn't glory, it wasn't victory, it was abandonment, betrayal, begging for food rations from alien distributors while Earth's own soil was strip-mined, watching generations of their children raised under foreign rule, forced to learn galactic culture while human history was erased. And worse, having to pretend it was all fair, all just, all progress. But humanity had never forgotten. It just waited. On the bridge of the exile, Maddox stood in silence, the glow of orbital flames dancing across his face. Outside, the remains of the Kefaris Accord fleet drifted like corpses in a cosmic graveyard. Their flagship, a symbol of interstellar unity, had been the last to fall, its engines still sputtering when human boarding parties carved it open from the inside. No survivors. Norrin entered, helmet under his arm, eyes bloodshot from 3 straight days of coordinating fleet movements. "They're offering negotiations," he said. Maddox didn't turn. That implies they still have a position to negotiate from. They're fractured. The Morithan have declared neutrality. The Uralex are threatening to pull out of the Accord entirely. The Selvarin want to surrender their border systems. And? Norrin walked to the console, placing his hand flat on the cold surface. "We did what we came to do, Maddox. They'll never forget us now. We can end this." Maddox finally turned, slowly. His eyes were empty, not with hate, but with something worse. Purpose. "You still think this was about reminding them who we are?" Norrin's breath caught. "You want to end them?" "No," Maddox said. "I want them to never recover. I want every species who watched us crawl for scraps to understand what it means when you corner a species that builds monsters when it's afraid." He stepped forward, voice low. "Every war has an end, Norrin. But terror, that outlives empires." Norrin's voice cracked. "There are children out there, Civilians. Not every alien out there wanted us crushed. Maddox's face didn't shift. Neither did every human on Titan, and yet they all burned. Silence fell. Not angry, just final. Outside, another Earthborn fleet emerged from a stealth veil. Not warships this time. Carriers, massive, ugly industrial carriers built to transport mobile weapons platforms and self-replicating drone swarms. Tech banned under the Accord's AI war treaties. But humans weren't bound by the Accord anymore. The lead ship broadcast a single word across the quadrant: deliverance. It was a lie. Across the galaxy, chaos deepened. On Exar 9, a planet known for its serene crystal forests and rich bioculture, alien aristocrats awoke to the sound of orbital bombardment, not from the sky, but from underground. Human operatives, embedded for years as gardeners, assistants, even lovers, rose in unison and triggered the buried munitions they'd smuggled piece by piece over decades. By dawn, the capital was a crater. On Virex Station Theta, a mid-tier manufacturing colony, workers revolted. Not humans, alien slaves. Inspired by human rebellion, they turned on their masters and seized control. A message was sent out in over 30 languages. If humans can burn the sky, so can we. Earth's uprising had become something far worse than a war. It had become a spark. Maddox stared at the strategic map, stars blinking, many now marked in red. Not from captured territory, but from systems left ungoverned, lawless, burning. It was more than he had ever hoped for. And yet something inside him refused to settle. Deep beneath the exile, in the vault where the oldest weapons were kept, Maddox stood before the device known only as Judgment. It wasn't a missile, it wasn't a bomb, it was a memory weapon, a psychic pulse generator capable of destabilizing the emotional equilibrium of an entire species across light years. It didn't kill. It broke. It made leaders weep mid-speech, turned armies to ash without firing a shot, because they lost the will to fight. It had been designed by humans who survived the first alien purges during the colonization era, considered unethical, unusable. Now it was Maddox's final move. Norrin followed him in, breath fogging in the icy air of the containment vault. "Tell me this isn't real," Norrin whispered. "Tell me you're not going to use that." Maddox didn't look at him. "Do you know how many Earthborn committed suicide during the Accord's assimilation years? How many families were forced to voluntarily integrate by giving up their culture, their names, their children?" He turned now, eyes alive with cold fire. "This isn't about winning, Norrin. It's about making them feel every second of what they made us endure." "You'll turn us into villains." Maddox's voice was razor-sharp. "We already are." He placed his hand on the device. The activation countdown began. On Earth, Mara sat with her son, watching the stars. The boy hadn't spoken in days. His father's name had shown up on the fallen operative list. Her hands trembled as she cradled the small transmitter he'd left behind, a farewell message that simply said, "Make them remember." But was this what he meant? Her screen flickered. Earth Command had gone silent, and then a chill passed through her, deep in her bones, like the world had exhaled for the last time, because something had been unleashed. Not fire, not bullets, despair. It spread like a storm. Across thousands of ships, alien captains dropped to their knees, crying. Soldiers refused orders, paralyzed by panic attacks. Entire fleets drifted as their crews collapsed into silence, haunted by guilt they hadn't earned, but now felt in every nerve. One Selvarin commander shot himself live on broadcast, muttering, "I see them now. I see what we did." Humanity had broken the Accord's spine. Now it shattered its mind. And yet, As the effect spread, Maddox stood still, breathing heavily, eyes glazed, staring at nothing. The weapon worked too well. Because in the reflection of the screen, he saw them. The colonists on Titan, the miners on Kepler, the boys who starved in the ration lines of New York arcology. And he saw himself, 20 years younger, clutching his dead brother's photo in a refugee camp while alien dignitaries stepped over his tears. This wasn't vengeance anymore, it was possession. Norrin found him kneeling, whispering, "They deserved it. They all deserved it." But Norrin didn't respond with anger. He just sat beside him. They did. But maybe we didn't deserve what this turned us into either. And for the first time in decades, Maddox didn't argue. He just wept. Across the stars, the storm of madness finally began to fade. The galaxy lay cracked, not conquered. Accord members dissolved. Entire species went dark. Others refused to speak to one another, terrified of who they might become. And Earth? Earth sat in silence. No parades, no celebrations, just millions of scarred survivors staring at a sky no longer watched by anyone but themselves. Humanity had won, but the price was something they didn't yet understand. Something they couldn't undo. The silence stretched for weeks. No fleets moved, no broadcasts came, no alien voice dared cross Earth's channels. It wasn't peace, it was aftermath, the kind that settles after a storm so violent that even survivors are afraid to speak its name. In the shattered remains of what was once the Accord, the survivors crawled toward order. Systems abandoned their alliances, entire empires fell into civil unrest. The Morithan dynasty, one of the oldest galactic powers, fractured into warring city-states. The Selvarin went dark, retreating into their star cluster, sealing it off from the rest of the galaxy. No trade, no ships, just silence. Humanity had become the mirror they didn't want to look into, and now they couldn't turn away. Back on Earth, under the burned sky of old Paris Command, Maddox stood alone on a ruined balcony. The air smelled like melted steel and rain. The victory was complete, unquestioned, irreversible. But it didn't feel like a win. It felt like surviving a fire you started yourself, knowing your enemies were gone. But so were parts of you you'd never get back. Below, workers moved slowly, rebuilding one block at a time. Not because they were hopeful, but because there was nothing else left to do. Earth's skies were free now. No alien satellites, no Accord patrols. But the freedom felt heavy, a kind of weight they hadn't anticipated. Norrin joined him, limping from an old injury that still hadn't healed. His face had aged 10 years in 10 weeks. He didn't salute. No one saluted anymore. "They're calling it the collapse," Norrin muttered. "Galactic historians say this is the start of a dark age." Maddox didn't look away from the horizon. "They had their golden age, and we lived under its boot." "You really think this was worth it?" Maddox's voice was quieter now. Not broken, but worn. "Doesn't matter what I think. It's done. The only thing left is what comes after." Norrin nodded. "They want a new council. Just humans this time. Old generals, resistance leaders. You'd sit at the head." Maddox turned slowly, his eyes unreadable. "I didn't fight to rule. I fought so no one else could rule us." He walked away without another word. On Titan, the once-burned colony had become a shrine, the first place Earth lost to the Accord. Now it stood as a symbol of where it all began. Memorials lined the walls, photos of the dead, holograms of lost children, burnt-out mining gear laid with care beside stone markers. Mara stood there with her son, his small hand gripping hers as they stared at the plaque bearing her husband's name. No speeches, no flowers, just quiet grief. A man approached, dressed in battle-worn black armor. Captain Rain, the same man who'd executed surrendering aliens on Phobos. He removed his helmet slowly. "I served with him," he said, voice gravel-thick. "He didn't die easy, but he died right." Mara didn't flinch. She didn't cry. Her voice was calm. "Did we win?" Rain didn't answer right away. "We got our sky back," he said finally, "but it's darker now." In orbit above Jupiter, the Exile drifted silently, its engines cold. Maddox had left command weeks ago, handing the fleet to junior officers, most of them just barely out of their 20s. The veterans, those who'd lived through the dark years, retreated to the shadows. Some returned to ruined homes. Others vanished. A few took their own lives, unable to live in a world where the war was no longer the purpose. Humanity had survived, but survival had a cost. In the galactic ruins, a few species tried to rebuild contact. Hesitant envoys reached out to Earth, using neutral beacons and encrypted channels. They didn't come to retaliate. They came to understand. What drove humans to wait this long? What made them endure such humiliation for generations, only to return with such vengeance? They didn't understand, because they had never been made small, never been told they didn't matter, never been erased politely by smiling faces who called it cooperation. Earth didn't respond to those messages. It just listened and remembered. In a remote bunker in old Siberia, where the snow hadn't melted in decades, Maddox stood before the last sealed vault. Inside were the original Ghost Protocol records, every name, every mission, every sacrifice. He didn't speak as the vault opened, just stared at the wall lined with photos of the forgotten. No parades, no medals, only names. He pulled a small chip from his pocket. The only copy of the Judgment Weapon's activation code. The one thing that could start the terror again. With one move, he could bring the galaxy back to its knees. But he didn't. He crushed the chip beneath his boot. Not out of mercy. Out of exhaustion. It was over. Whatever came next would have to be written by a generation not built from rage. Months later, Earth's skies cleared. New ships were built. Not for war, but for exploration, trade, defense. Cautious treaties formed, not alliances. Just understandings. And above every launch pad, every rebuilt city, every school and colony, a single phrase was etched into the steel. We remember. Not as a threat, as a warning. Because the galaxy had learned the hard way that the most dangerous enemy wasn't the one who struck first. It was the one who waited in silence, swallowing pain, counting losses, burying its dead, and never forgetting. Humanity didn't win because they were strong. They won because when the moment came, they unleashed what no other species ever prepared for, a memory that kills. The stars would never be the same, and the galaxy would never forget what Earth had been hiding all along.